The dust storm rolled across the Montana territory like a vengeful spirit, driving most folks indoors on that sweltering August afternoon in 1878. Everyone except Eliza O'Malley, who stood defiantly on Humboldt's Main Street, her chestnut hair whipping around her face as she stared down the man who just purchased her from her stepfather for 3 head of prime cattle and a weathered saddle. "He bought me for cattle," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "Like I'm nothing more than livestock myself." Yancey Neal, the tall cowboy whose sun-weathered face had hardened at her words, stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden boardwalk. His eyes, the color of a summer sky, held hers without wavering. "Then you're priceless to me," he said simply, tipping his hat back. "Because those were prize cattle, madam, and I don't regret the trade for a moment." Eliza blinked, unsure whether to slap him or laugh at his audacity. The man before her didn't look like the monsters her stepfather had threatened to sell her to when the drinking took hold. Yancey Neal stood tall and lean, with calloused hands and honest eyes, but that hardly mattered. She was property now, traded like a commodity. "I am not yours to own," she declared, backing away. "I'd sooner run off with the wolves than be any man's purchase." "Then run," he answered, making no move to stop her. "But know that paper your stepfather signed isn't a bill of sale for you, it's a debt transfer. He owed me money he couldn't pay, so I took what he offered, legal guardianship, until you turn 21 or marry." His voice softened. "Your stepfather is a gambling fool, Miss O'Malley, but I'm not in the business of buying people." The revelation struck Eliza like a physical blow. At 19, she'd spent years watching her stepfather drink away what little they had after her mother's death, his threats to sell her off becoming more frequent. She'd believed him capable of anything, especially after he dragged her to town that morning, announcing his intentions to the first man they'd encountered this rancher with his steady gaze. "You expect me to believe you paid good cattle for guardianship?" she asked, suspicion lacing every word. "I paid to keep you from the alternatives," Yancey said plainly. "Your stepfather was heading to Dirty Pete's gambling hall next. The men there wouldn't have offered guardianship." The implication hung between them, terrible in its likelihood. Eliza had heard stories of women sold to brothels when debts ran too high. She swallowed hard, trying to make sense of this unexpected turn. "So what now, Mr. Neal?" she asked, her chin lifting despite the uncertainty churning inside her. "Now you have choices," he said, gesturing toward the general store. "My ranch is half a day's ride from town. I have a housekeeper there, Mrs. Abernathy, who's been complaining about needing help. You can work there, earn your keep and wages until you decide what you want. Or I can arrange passage to wherever you'd like to go." Eliza studied him, searching for deception. Finding none, she asked, "And what do you get from this arrangement, Mr. Neal?" A slight smile touched his lips. "Peace of mind, Miss O'Malley, and 3 fewer cattle to worry about." He glanced skyward. "Storm's passing. We should stock up on supplies before heading to the ranch unless you've decided on that passage elsewhere." The thought of freedom, true freedom to choose her own path, was almost overwhelming after years under her stepfather's control. But freedom required money she didn't have, and skills she wasn't sure would earn her keep in a strange town. "I'll go to your ranch," she decided, practical despite her pride. "But only until I've earned enough to make my own way." "Fair enough," Yancey agreed, offering his arm with unexpected courtesy. "Shall we?" Reluctantly, Eliza placed her hand on his sleeve, feeling the rough wool of his coat and the strength of the arm beneath. "This doesn't mean I trust you, Mr. Neal." "I wouldn't expect you to, Miss O'Malley," he replied. "Trust is earned, not purchased, not even with prize cattle." Despite herself, Eliza felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward as they made their way to the general store, the dust storm already becoming nothing more than a memory behind them. The journey to the Neal ranch was longer than Eliza had anticipated, filled with stretches of silence broken only by Yancey pointing out landmarks or telling brief stories about the territory. She learned he had come west from Pennsylvania after the war, using saved Army pay to purchase land when prices were low. His herd had grown from 10 head to over 100, and he employed 4 cowhands who lived in a bunkhouse on the property. What happened to your family? She asked as they crested a hill that revealed a sprawling valley below, a cluster of buildings nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered mountains. Lost my pa to the war, my mother to influenza after, he said simply. My younger brother James works with me. He's probably out with the herd now. Eliza nodded, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Her entire life was now tied to this stranger and his remote ranch. As if reading her thoughts, Yancey added, town's accessible by horseback if the weather's good. Mrs. Abernathy rides in twice monthly for supplies and social calls. The ranch house came into view as they descended into the valley, a substantial 2-story structure built of sturdy logs with a wide porch and glass windows that caught the late afternoon sunlight. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and flower boxes hung beneath 2 of the downstairs windows, bright spots of color against the weathered wood. You have a beautiful home, Eliza admitted grudgingly. Built it with my own hands with help from the men, Yancey replied, pride evident in his voice. Added on as the herd grew, your room will be upstairs next to Mrs. Abernathy's. I'm downstairs. James has the room above the kitchen. As they approached, a stout woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her shrewd eyes took in Eliza's presence with undisguised curiosity. Mr. Neal, I see you've brought company, she called, her voice carrying across the yard. Yancey helped Eliza down from the wagon before responding. Mrs. Abernathy, this is Miss Eliza O'Malley. She'll be staying with us and helping you around the house. The older woman's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. Is that so? And where did you find this young lady, if I may ask? Eliza braced herself for humiliation, certain Yancey would explain the cattle transaction, but he surprised her. Miss O'Malley needed a change of circumstances, he said evenly. I've offered her employment here, Mrs. Abernathy's gaze softened as she took in Eliza's worn dress and determined expression. Well then, come inside, child. You look like you could use a hot meal and a proper bath. We've got both in abundance thanks to Mr. Neal's modern sensibilities. Indoor plumbing, if you can imagine. She ushered Eliza toward the house, chattering all the while. I've been after him to hire help for months. This house is far too large for one woman to manage, especially with 5 hungry men tracking mud through it at all hours. Eliza glanced back at Yancey, who was already unloading supplies from the wagon. He caught her eye and nodded once, as if confirming that she was indeed in good hands, before returning to his task. The interior of the ranch house defied Eliza's expectations. Rather than the Spartan bachelor quarters she'd imagined, the rooms were comfortably furnished with well-crafted pieces, colorful rugs, and even a few paintings. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, with bookshelves built into the walls on either side. Mr. Neal's quite the reader, Mrs. Abernathy explained, following Eliza's gaze to the packed shelves. Sends away for books regular as clockwork, says a man's mind needs feeding same as his body. She led Eliza upstairs to a bedroom that overlooked the eastern pastures. This will be your room. Bathrooms at the end of the hall you'll share with me. The men use the one downstairs. The room was simple but comfortable, with a bed covered in a colorful quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk beneath the window. Fresh flowers stood in a blue glass vase on the nightstand. The flowers are a nice touch, Eliza commented, surprised by the thoughtfulness. Mrs. Abernathy chuckled. Don't look at me. Mr. Neal must have asked James to put them in here. He's always had gentlemanly instincts, despite living out here with nothing but cows and cowboys for company. She patted the bed. Rest a bit if you like. Dinner's at 6 sharp. The men eat in the dining room, and I expect you'll join them tonight so they can make your acquaintance proper. Left alone, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, her mind whirling with the day's events. That morning, she'd awakened in the tiny shack she shared with her stepfather, facing another day of his drunken tirades. Now she was in a comfortable bedroom in a prosperous ranch house, employed rather than owned, despite what her stepfather had intended. She wasn't naive enough to believe her troubles were over. Yancey Neal might present himself as her savior now, but men had motives, especially when dealing with young women in desperate situations. She would remain vigilant and save every penny of her wages. The moment she sensed danger, she would flee. With that resolution firmly in mind, Eliza unpacked her meager belongings, 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a hairbrush, a small wooden box containing her mother's locket, and a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice that had been her mother's favorite. It wasn't much to show for 19 years of life, but it was hers, and no one, not her stepfather, not Yancey Neal, could take that from her. Dinner that evening proved less intimidating than Eliza had feared. Besides Yancey and Mrs. Abernathy, she met James Neal, a younger version of his brother with the same blue eyes but a more open countenance and 3 cowhands. Hector, a Mexican man with a magnificent mustache who served as foreman. Tobias, a quiet, hulking man whose hands seemed too large for the silverware he carefully wielded. And Caleb, barely older than Eliza herself, who blushed fiercely whenever she glanced his way. Miss O'Malley will be helping Mrs. Abernathy with household duties, Yancey explained after introducing her. I expect you all to treat her with the same respect you'd show your own sisters. The men nodded solemnly, though Eliza noticed James giving his brother a curious look, which Yancey studiously ignored. Conversation flowed easily around her as the men discussed cattle, weather, and preparations for the coming winter. Eliza remained mostly silent, observing the dynamics of the household. Yancey clearly commanded respect, but there was an easy camaraderie among them, all that spoke of fairness and mutual appreciation. Even Mrs. Abernathy contributed to the conversation without hesitation, her opinions given the same weight as any man's at the table. After dinner, the men moved to the porch to smoke, while Mrs. Abernathy showed Eliza the kitchen and pantry, explaining the daily routines of the household. When they returned to the dining room to clear the dishes, they found Yancey alone, examining a ledger by lamplight. Mrs. Abernathy, would you excuse us for a moment? He asked. I'd like to speak with Miss O'Malley about her duties and compensation. The housekeeper nodded and disappeared with a stack of plates, leaving Eliza standing uncertainly across the table from her new employer. Please, sit, he invited, closing the ledger. When she complied, he continued, your wages will be $20 a month plus room and board. Is that acceptable? Eliza blinked in surprise. It was more than fair, generous even. Yes, that would be acceptable, she managed. Good, you'll have Sundays free and 1 additional day each month if you wish to ride into town with Mrs. Abernathy. I understand you may want to establish your independence quickly, so I won't hold you to any long-term commitment. However, I do ask that you give 2 weeks' notice if you decide to leave, so we can arrange for your replacement. His business-like manner was reassuring, though Eliza couldn't help wondering why he was being so accommodating to a woman he'd essentially purchased that morning. Why are you doing this? She asked abruptly. You could have simply left me in town after settling my stepfather's debt. Why bring me here, offer me wages? Yancey studied her for a long moment before answering. I've seen what happens to women with no options in towns like Humboldt. Your stepfather put you in an impossible position. I had the means to offer an alternative. He paused. Also, Mrs. Abernathy really does need help. She's not as young as she once was, though don't tell her I said so. A small smile tugged at Eliza's lips despite her determination to remain stoic. Is that all? Yancey hesitated. No, he admitted. I also recognized something in you that reminded me of myself when I first came west, determined to survive despite the circumstances. He stood, collecting the ledger. Get some rest, Miss O'Malley. Tomorrow will be busy as you learn the routines of the house. As he reached the doorway, Eliza called after him, Mr. Neal. When he turned, she said simply, Thank you. He nodded once, his expression unreadable in the shadowy light, and then he was gone, leaving Eliza to ponder the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place and this man. The days fell into a rhythm as September gave way to October. Eliza learned the workings of the ranch house, helping Mrs. Abernathy with cooking, cleaning, mending, and tending the kitchen garden that provided much of their fresh produce. The work was hard but satisfying, so different from the chaotic existence she'd known with her stepfather. She saw Yancey primarily at meals, where conversation remained centered on ranch business and local news. Sometimes in the evenings, she would find him reading by the fire, and occasionally he would recommend a book from his extensive library. These small interactions were unfailingly polite, even warm at times, but he maintained a respectful distance that both relieved and, increasingly, puzzled her. It was James who first breached the subject of her arrival at the ranch, cornering her one afternoon as she hung laundry in the brisk autumn air. "I've been wondering," he said, leaning against the porch rail, "how exactly my brother came to offer you employment. He mentioned a debt and your stepfather, but he's been unusually tight-lipped about the details." Eliza paused, a damp sheet billowing in the wind. "I'm surprised he hasn't told you. He traded 3 cattle for me." James's eyebrows shot up. "He what?" "My stepfather owed him money. When he couldn't pay, he offered me instead as if I were property to be traded." She pinned the sheet firmly to the line. "Your brother accepted the trade, though he claims what he purchased was guardianship, not ownership." James whistled low. "That explains a few things." At Eliza's questioning look, he elaborated. "Yan's been acting strange since he brought you here, more distracted than usual, spending extra time checking fences on the far side of the property." "Perhaps he regrets his impulsive purchase," Eliza suggested, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "No," James said with surprising certainty. "My brother doesn't do anything impulsively. If he traded good cattle for your guardianship, he had his reasons." He pushed away from the rail. "And for what it's worth, I think those reasons might have less to do with debt collection and more to do with the way he watches you when he thinks no one's looking." Before Eliza could respond to this startling statement, James tipped his hat and strode away, leaving her to ponder his words as she finished hanging the laundry. That evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Eliza found herself alone with Yancey in the main room after dinner. The other men had retired early, exhausted from moving cattle to the lower pastures ahead of the weather, and Mrs. Abernathy had gone to bed with a headache. Yancey sat in his usual chair by the fire, a book open on his lap, while Eliza worked on mending one of the cowhand's shirts. The comfortable silence was broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional turning of a page. "Do you miss town life?" Yancey asked suddenly, closing his book. Eliza looked up, surprised by the personal nature of the question after weeks of casual conversation. "Not particularly. My life in town wasn't exactly pleasant. Because of your stepfather," she nodded, setting aside her mending. "My mother married him after my father died in a mining accident when I was 12. He was charming at first, but after Mother passed from pneumonia 3 years later, the drinking took over." She stared into the fire, memories washing over her. "The last 4 years have been difficult." "I'm sorry," Yancey said softly. "No one should have to endure what you did." "Life isn't fair," Eliza replied with a small shrug. "You learn to survive." "Yes, you do," he agreed, his gaze thoughtful. "But survival isn't enough, is it? There should be more to life than merely existing from one day to the next." The question struck Eliza deeply. For so long, survival had been her only goal, avoiding her stepfather's wrath, finding enough food, keeping a roof over her head. The concept of wanting more seemed almost foreign. "What more is there?" she asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Yancey leaned forward, firelight playing across his features. "Purpose, connection, joy in simple things." He gestured around the room, "building something lasting, sharing it with others." "Is that why you built this ranch, for purpose?" "Partly," he admitted. "After the war, I needed something to believe in again. This land, these animals, they don't care about politics or boundaries or the color of a man's uniform. They respond to care and respect." His voice softened. "But I've come to realize a man needs more than purpose. A house needs more than walls to be a home." The intensity in his eyes made Eliza's heart beat faster. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly look at him not as her reluctant guardian or employer, but as a man. A handsome man, she acknowledged privately, with strength in his hands and kindness in his eyes that she'd been too guarded to fully recognize. "James told me something interesting today," she said, changing the subject before her thoughts became too apparent. "He said you've been distracted lately, spending extra time away from the house." Yancey's expression shifted, a flicker of something embarrassment crossing his face. "My brother talks too much," he also said. Eliza hesitated, then pressed on, "That you watch me when you think no one's looking." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words. Yancey stood, moving to the window where snow continued to fall in the darkness. "I should apologize if I've made you uncomfortable," he said finally, his back still turned. "That was never my intention." "You haven't," Eliza found herself saying, rising from her chair. "I just don't understand why you would notice me at all." "I'm nothing special, just a woman you purchased for cattle." Yancey turned then, his expression pained. "Is that still how you see yourself? As a purchase? Isn't it how everyone sees me, the girl Yancey Neal bought with his prize herd?" "No one here knows the circumstances of your arrival except James, and now only because you told him," Yancey said firmly. "And I never saw you as a purchase, Eliza. From the moment I saw you standing beside your stepfather in town, defiance in your eyes despite your circumstances, I saw a woman of extraordinary strength and dignity." The use of her first name, the sincerity in his voice, sent warmth spreading through Eliza's chest. "Then why maintain this distance between us? You've been unfailingly polite, but sometimes it feels as though you're avoiding me." A rueful smile touched his lips. "Because I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't take advantage of your situation. You came here with no choice, dependent on my protection. What kind of man would I be if I used that to press unwanted attentions on you, and if they weren't unwanted?" The words escaped before Eliza could consider their implications. Yancey's eyes widened slightly. He took a step toward her, then stopped, uncertainty written plainly on his face. "Eliza, I don't want your gratitude or your sense of obligation. If there's ever to be anything between us, it must be because you truly wish it, not because you feel indebted to me." The honesty of his declaration touched something deep within her. For the first time in years, Eliza felt truly seen not as a burden or possession, but as a woman worthy of respect and choice. "What if I told you," she said carefully, "that I've come to admire the man who treats his workers fairly, reads poetry by firelight, and puts fresh flowers in a stranger's room? That perhaps I've been watching you too when I thought no one was looking?" The hope that bloomed on his face was answer enough, but he remained where he stood. "I would say that means more to me than you could know, but that I'm still determined to give you time and space to be certain of your own mind." Eliza closed the distance between them, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Standing before him, she looked up into eyes that held not possession or entitlement, but tender regard. "And if I told you I'm already certain," she whispered. Yancey raised his hand slowly, giving her every chance to move away as he gently touched her cheek. "Then I would tell you that from the moment I saw you, I knew you were worth far more than any cattle, that you are indeed priceless to me." His words echoed those he'd spoken on the day they met, but now Eliza understood their true meaning. When he lowered his head, she met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and possibilities neither had dared imagine just months before. The winter of 1878 was remembered as one of the harshest in Montana Territory's history, but within the walls of the Neal Ranch house, Eliza barely noticed the bitter cold. As snow piled high around the buildings, a different kind of warmth grew between her and Yancey, one built on conversations by firelight, shared books and ideas, and increasingly tender moments stolen in the quiet hours of the day. Their courtship progressed with a deliberate pace that frustrated James, who took to making exaggerated sighs whenever he found them talking earnestly instead of embracing. "At this rate, I'll be gray-haired before you two come to your senses," he complained one evening after Yancey had spent an hour explaining cattle breeding principles to a genuinely interested Eliza. "Some things shouldn't be rushed, little brother," Yancey replied, though the look he exchanged with Eliza held promises of a future they were both beginning to envision. Christmas brought a brief thaw in the weather and a celebration that filled the ranch house with warmth and laughter. Mrs. Abernathy outdid herself with a feast that left even Tobias unable to eat another bite, and gifts were exchanged around a pine tree the men had dragged in from the forest. Eliza, having saved her wages carefully, presented Yancey with a fine leather-bound journal, knowing his habit of recording ranch activities and personal reflections. "For your thoughts," she said as he unwrapped it, "though I hope you might share them with me as well." His gift to her came in a small box that made her heart skip when she first saw it. Opening it, she found not a ring as she'd half expected, and perhaps hoped, but a delicate gold locket nearly identical to her mother's, which had been damaged beyond repair years earlier. "I noticed you kept the broken one," Yancey explained as she lifted the locket with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Abernathy helped me find a similar design through the mail order catalog. I thought perhaps you might keep a remembrance of your mother in one side and create new memories for the other." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Eliza's eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, impulsively leaning across to kiss his cheek, much to the delight of their audience. Later that night, after the others had retired, Yancey found Eliza standing on the porch, wrapped in a heavy blanket as she gazed at stars that glittered like diamonds in the clear, cold sky. "You'll catch your death out here," he chided gently, moving to stand beside her. "It was worth it to see this," she replied, gesturing upward. "I don't think I've ever seen stars so bright. Cold nights bring the clearest skies," Yancey said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and drawing her against his warmth. "My father taught me the constellations when I was a boy." "That's Orion, there, see the 3 stars of his belt." Eliza followed his pointing finger, nestling closer as he named the patterns of stars overhead. After a comfortable silence, she spoke the words that had been building in her heart for weeks. "I love you, Yancey Neal." He stilled, then turned her gently to face him, his expression solemn in the starlight. "Are you certain I don't want you to feel?" Eliza pressed her fingers to his lips. "I'm certain. I love you not because you rescued me, or because you gave me a home, but because of who you are, a man of honor and kindness who sees me as I truly am and values me for it." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I love you too, Eliza O'Malley. More than I thought possible to love another person." He took her hands in his touch warming her despite the cold. "I don't want to rush you, but I need to ask, would you consider becoming my wife? Not now necessarily, but when you're ready." Eliza's heart soared at the words she'd been hoping to hear. "I would consider it very favorably," she said, unable to contain her smile. "In fact, I can't think of anything I want more." Yancey's laugh was joyous as he lifted her off her feet, spinning her once before setting her down and capturing her lips in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley with explosive greenery and wildflowers that carpeted the meadows. With the change in seasons came changes to the ranch as well. Calving season brought new life to the herd, and Eliza, now officially engaged to Yancey with a simple gold band on her finger, found herself increasingly involved in ranch operations beyond the house. She discovered a natural affinity for the financial aspects of ranching. Organizing the chaotic ledgers, Yancey had kept and implementing a more efficient system for tracking expenses and profits. Her suggestions for expanding the kitchen garden into a small orchard were met with enthusiasm, and she took pride in contributing to the ranch's growing prosperity. As the date for their June wedding approached, an unexpected letter arrived from Humboldt. Eliza's stepfather had died in a bar fight, leaving behind nothing but debts and the decrepit cabin they had shared. While she felt no grief for the man who had caused her so much pain, the news stirred memories she had tried to leave behind. "Are you all right?" Yancey asked, finding her sitting alone on the porch steps after the letter's delivery. "Yes," she said, making room for him to sit beside her. "It's strange I feel nothing for him, yet his death feels like the closing of a chapter I didn't realize was still open." Yancey took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "We all have chapters that shape us, even the painful ones. They make us who we are." Eliza leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his understanding. "I've been thinking about our wedding," she said, changing the subject to happier matters. "Mrs. Abernathy suggested we might use wildflowers rather than ordering expensive bouquets from back east." "Wildflowers would suit you," Yancey agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. natural and beautiful. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect June day that seemed designed by Providence for celebrations. The ceremony took place on the ranch, with a traveling preacher officiating and guests from neighboring ranches joining the household in witness. Eliza wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Abernathy had helped her sew, with wildflowers woven into her hair and her mother's locket around her neck. When she walked toward Yancey, who waited beneath an arch of twisted branches and early summer blooms, his expression of wonder and love made every hardship of her past fade into insignificance. This moment, this man was her future, and it promised to be more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream. "I take you, Eliza O'Malley, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Yancey's voice rang clear as he spoke his vows. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Eliza repeated her own vows, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here from a woman traded for cattle to a bride cherished beyond measure. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yancey's kiss sealed not just their marriage but the transformation of both their lives. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice their number. As twilight deepened, Yancey led Eliza away from the festivities toward a surprise he'd been preparing for weeks: a small cabin built on a rise overlooking the valley, far enough from the main house for privacy, but close enough for convenience. "Our own place," he explained as he carried her over the threshold, "though we'll still take meals with the others. I thought you might want somewhere that's just ours." The cabin was simple but beautifully crafted, with a large bedroom, a sitting area with a stone fireplace, and windows that caught both sunrise and sunset. Eliza turned in a slow circle, taking in the furniture Yancey had commissioned and the curtains Mrs. Abernathy had secretly sewn at her request. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears of joy threatening to spill. "Everything is perfect." When Yancey took her in his arms, their kiss was different from all those that had come before, deeper, more passionate, with the knowledge that nothing stood between them now. As husband and wife, they discovered each other in ways both tender and passionate, their love expressed in whispered words and gentle touches that grew bolder as the night deepened. Afterward, lying in each other's arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Eliza traced the outline of Yancey's face with her fingertips. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she confessed. "That day in town, when my stepfather dragged me to meet you, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. For both of us," Yancey murmured, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "I thought I had everything I needed in this land, these cattle, this sky. I was wrong. I needed you." The years that followed brought changes, both expected and surprising, to the Neal Ranch. Eliza's business acumen, combined with Yancey's ranching knowledge, transformed their operation into one of the most prosperous in the territory. They expanded their herd, purchased additional land, and even ventured into horse breeding when Eliza discovered a talent for working with the animals. Their family grew as well. Their first child, a daughter named Catherine after Eliza's mother, arrived just over a year after their wedding, followed by twin boys, Michael and David, 2 years later. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning to ride almost before they could walk and developing the same love for the land that their parents shared. James eventually married the schoolteacher from Humboldt, building his own house on the property and bringing new energy to their expanding enterprise. Mrs. Abernathy remained with them until her passing at the age of 78, by which time she had become more family than employee, beloved Grandma Abby, to the children who had never known their biological grandparents. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Eliza and Yancey stood together on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Their children played in the yard below, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," Eliza said, leaning against her husband's solid strength. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when I told you my stepfather had sold me for cattle Yancey smiled, his arm tightening around her waist. I said you were priceless to me. The strange thing is, I think I believed you even then, Eliza admitted. Some part of me knew you were different from any man I'd known. I knew you were special from the moment I saw you, Yancey replied, turning to face her. The years had added character to his face, lines of laughter around his eyes and a touch of gray at his temples, but his gaze held the same warmth that had first captured her heart. I just never imagined how much joy you would bring into my life. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Eliza thought of all they had built together, not just the prosperous ranch and the family they cherished, but the deep, abiding love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. A love that had proven, day after day, year after year, that she was indeed priceless to the man who had once traded cattle for her freedom. I love you, Yancey Neal, she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them beneath a winter sky filled with stars. And I love you, Eliza Neal, he answered, bending to kiss her with all the tenderness of their first kiss and all the passion of their years together. More than cattle, more than land, more than life itself. Their laughter mingled as they drew apart, a private joke that had evolved from painful beginning to cherished memory. Below them, their children called for them to join in their game, and hand in hand, they descended the steps to embrace the life they had created, a life neither could have imagined on that dusty street in Humboldt all those years ago, when a desperate transaction had become the foundation for a love story as vast and enduring as the Montana sky above them. As the years continued to pass, the Neal Ranch grew into a landmark of the territory, known for its quality stock and fair dealings. Eliza and Yancey's children grew tall and strong, each finding their own path while remaining connected to the land that had shaped them. Catherine, with her mother's sharp mind and father's gentle strength, eventually took over the business aspects of the ranch. Michael developed his father's touch with cattle, while David discovered a passion for the law, studying in Helena before returning to help neighboring ranchers with legal matters. By their 25th wedding anniversary, Eliza and Yancey found themselves at the center of a thriving community that had grown up around their success. The original cabin had been expanded twice to accommodate family gatherings that now included grandchildren, as Catherine had married the son of a neighboring rancher and blessed them with 2 lively boys who had their grandmother's chestnut hair and their grandfather's sky-blue eyes. On a golden afternoon in late summer, as they sat together on the porch that had witnessed so many of their conversations over the years, Eliza took Yancey's weathered hand in hers. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. "If my stepfather had taken me to someone else that day, or if you hadn't been in town?" Yancey considered the question, his thumb absently tracing the lines of her palm as had become his habit over the decades. "I believe some things are meant to be, Eliza. Not in a way that denies our choices, but in a way that honors them. I chose to help you that day, and you chose to trust me enough to come here. Every day since, we've chosen each other, again and again." Eliza smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains. "The best choice I ever made," she murmured. "Mine too," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "And I'd trade 1,000 cattle for the same outcome." Their laughter, rich with shared memories and the deep understanding that only years together could bring, drifted across the valley as darkness fell, wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. Above, the first stars appeared, the same stars they had named together on cold winter nights and warm summer evenings throughout their years together. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren's excited voices as they helped bring in the horses for the night, the next generation already learning the rhythms and responsibilities of the life Eliza and Yancey had built from nothing but love and determination. "We did well, didn't we?" Eliza asked softly, a note of wonder still in her voice after all these years. "We did," Yancey agreed, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I brought home a woman who thought she'd been bought for cattle. A woman who turned out to be priceless," Eliza finished, tilting her face up for his kiss as the last light faded from the sky. leaving them surrounded by the quiet beauty of the home and life they had created together, a legacy of love that would endure long after them. As timeless and true as the Montana land that had witnessed their extraordinary journey.